time to go through the morning papers once again. With me reviewing them this morning are the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the journalist and author Gemma Forte, back for a second round. Good to see you both again. We've dealt with a lot of the front pages. We're kind of delving inside this time round, aren't we? And Gemma, you found something in The Independent, online only, of course, but you found it online about, this is really focusing on the Home Secretary, isn't it, this article?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there was huge consternation when Sunak took over as Prime Minister and declared that he was going to be, a bit of a fresh start, and then appointed her as Home Secretary when literally she'd just been got rid of for breaching the ministerial code. Not once, not twice, 6 times. And, I'm old enough to remember when breaching the ministerial code once meant the end of a political career. Not anymore. So Suella Braverman has stepped into the breach, and this is really just a question mark over, his appointments. He's also put Gavin Williamson back into the heart of government, which again, as a mother of 2 children who are being educated throughout the pandemic, I just do not get this at all. To me, his entire contribution was just ineptitude, total ineptitude and chaos, but he's been given a knighthood and he's back in government. So I think what it's talking about here is political capital. Suella Braverman has used some very inflammatory language in Parliament. She clearly hasn't got a grip on the situation down in Manston, which is just utterly horrific. So really, is this the best that the Tory party can offer us in terms of talent? They always cited Liz Truss as talent, and then she was made Prime Minister, and that sort of exposed that one for what it was. So interesting appointments.
Well, yes, and he would argue, even though they're people that you don't particularly rate, he would argue that it's important to pull the party together, and some of them kind of represent different factions, and he's keen to have a cabinet that reflects all those different sides of the party. Let's move into the Mirror, shall we, Dawn, next. And you've spotted a story about strikes at Heathrow and the impact that could have.
Yeah, as if the Qatar World Cup, which is coming up on November the 20th, so not long away, isn't complicated enough as it is with the human rights issue. There are now strikes potentially taking place at Heathrow that will affect fans trying to travel out there. So as you can see, there are 3 days of strikes. This is at Heathrow, and it's the Unite Union, and they're looking after the contractors that work there. Up to 700 people could go on strike for 3 days, just as people are trying to make their way out to the World Cup. Now, as the Lobby Jackie's been discussing on your sports bulletins, it is kicking off very soon. It means the domestic football season is literally on ice until the end of December. This is the last week of domestic football we're going to have coming up this week. So it's incredibly important. And, there's a lot of controversy about this. I think Gary Neville was on Have I Got News For You last night, being pulled apart because whilst protesting about the human rights in which are awful, he was going out as we paid as a commentator. Likewise, Gary Neville. There's an awful lot of controversy. And Anna, I'm a huge football fan, and I just won't be watching it. I'm sorry, I cannot bring myself to support anything that's happening in the country where being gay can lead to the death penalty. And as a woman, if you are sexually assaulted, you are the guilty party for having sex outside of marriage. So, I want England to do well, obviously, but I think the hypocrisy and the human rights issues involved in this are appalling. But this basic story is, on top of all of that, you might not even be able to get there in the first place, which is no bad thing, because of 3 days of more strikes, as Gemma was talking in the first hour, coming up at Heathrow.
Well, yes, so lots of question marks for fans there and lots of things to consider. Let's move on, shall we, Gemma, to a story inside The Guardian, and this is about a new rail line for the North and whether or not it's going to go ahead.
Yeah, so as part of these spending reviews, Grant Shapps has come out and basically said that the Northern Powerhouse rail, which was part of their 2019 manifesto, he said, there's not much point in it really, which is extraordinary when they literally got in on a mandate of levelling up the North, which is crying out for better infrastructure, better transport links, which of course provides jobs and just is investment in those areas. So I think there's going to be a lot of discourse about this coming up. They've already ditched the eastern leg of HS2, which is going to connect Birmingham to Leeds, which arguably again was the most important important part of that project, as opposed to making it quicker to get from North down to London, which sort of is already pretty well serviced. So again, you're talking billions of money that have been invested into HS2, and then sort of we've not seen anything from that. I don't know. I mean, I understand we've talked about this already, about this, we're not going to spend anything. But when so much of this black hole has been caused by the government and then they're not sticking to their mandate, just very problematic.
Well, yeah, and we'll see again, that's another thing that's under review. Sorry, Gemma, I just talked over you. Apologies, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I thought you'd finished. I think this article is suggesting it's under review, so it's another thing that's possibly will be announced in the autumn statement. So lots of question marks over that, and lots of stories running at the moment about possible changes. Let's turn our attention though now, Dawn, to the Daily Mail, and this focuses on the big party essentially that King Charles threw last night ahead of COP27. He, of course, not going.
Absolutely. Liz Truss advised him, in fact, pretty much banned King Charles from attending COP27, which starts tomorrow, I believe, in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where the Great and the Good are gathering to discuss the damage we are doing to the planet. Charles was banned. I think he's sort of pretty much unbanned now by Rishi Sunak, but obviously it's too late for Charles to travel out there and change all his plans. So he threw a little bash, as he does, for 200 people at Buckingham Palace last night, where you actually could see it from that picture. Rishi Sunak was there, and Stella McCartney was there. It's business leaders, environmentalists, all basically having a mini COP27, discussing what we can do with the crisis we are all facing. And in a way, I think what he did is actually probably a better thing, because they are talking about it, and it doesn't involve lots of people flying thousands of miles to go to Egypt, many of them in private jets, as we saw in COP26 in Glasgow, to talk about stuff that probably never will get done. And it's basically all about the money, isn't it? As we discussed in the first hour, reviewing the papers, the developing world is really suffering, while the richer nations are. A lot of hot air coming out of COP26, COP27, how many more is it going to take? But not really doing anything, just sort of like, it's all about the money they can, I think, make and save out of it.
Well, yeah, certainly lots of targets being announced. It's whether they're met, I guess, is the answer, whether it's accountability.
This is a banner, isn't it? I mean, they announced lots of targets at COP26 and a year on, and how many of those targets have been hit? None.
Well, yeah, and that's another one to watch. It starts tomorrow, goes on, I think, till the 17th, I'm not sure, but don't hold me to that, around then. Let's move on to slightly less serious story, Gemma, let's be honest. Well, I say it's not serious. Some people might find it really serious. It's what's in your celebrations. And what's the Guardian's take on this? Very briefly, we haven't got long.
They're taking out bounty. It is. It's absolutely devastating. That's my favourite. What are they thinking? And I'm not the only one. This caused huge uproar from people like Lorraine Kelly and Piers Morgan and various others. And I agree with them.
Do you think this is a big PR stunt? They're threatening taking them out. It's a bit like the autumn statement, maybe. Threatening taking them out, get lots of publicity, and then go, actually, we'll put them back in. I'm sure that's not true anyway. But we can talk about celebrations for hours, but we are out of time. I'll see you again in an hour. Gemma and Dawn, as ever, thanks very much indeed for taking us through that little selection. All the top stories coming up next.